All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Cultish, Entering the Kingdom of the Cults. My name's Jeremiah Roberts. I'm one of the co-hosts here. I am joined, as always, by Andrew, the super sleuth of the show, sleuthing around your super secret headquarters in Harriman, Utah. Eventually, there might be a fan base out there, like, going around trying to find Andrew, like, where's Waldo, like, where's Andrew? They're trying to track you down. But anyways, man, how are you doing up there?
I'm doing well. It's just crazy because it's like when you see me on the screen, I actually went to space and back just to get to the screen. So I'm like a celestial space traveler right now.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty cool.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Didn't you just posted something? You were with Dusty Marshall, one of your fellow compadres up in Salt Lake City, Utah, but you were you were doing harvesting some chickens, or what was going on up there?
Yeah, so my buddy Dusty had about 40 chickens that he's going to start selling from his farm, and he needed some help like slaughtering the chickens, butchering them. So I went up there, and it was quite the experience, to say the least. And yeah, that post was a little bit triggering for some people, but it is what it is. It was just my thoughts on it. So there we go.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. Hey, what's up, everyone? Our brand new sponsor of Cultish is the Redeemed podcast. Our good friend Edward Cultish has put together a really well done Bible dramatization. It's honestly a great alternative to a lot of other content that's out there. So if you go to redeemedpodcast.org, you can see a couple great examples of the type of Bible dramatizations that he has done. And if you like what you hear, please consider supporting him. He's currently trying to raise funds for his next project. So again, we'd ask that you go to redeemedpodcast.org and check out the incredible content with this new Bible dramatization. And please consider supporting our good friend. Back to the episode. So that being said, we are here with Amber Aldrich, and it's good to actually talk to you. You've been going to church for a while, and it's always interesting to see someone, walk past you and you just assume they've just been part of the church for a long time. You're relatively a new Christian.
Yeah, that's right.
But you have quite the story, especially, let's just start at the beginning. I just curious about it. So we have talked about William Branham.
Yeah.
And a couple of times we did a historical origins series with our good friend John Collins. By the time this episode drops, we would have talked to our friend Naomi, who is part of this polygamous offshoot of William Branham. That was actually part of your background too. Tell us, just let's jump in and tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. I, as a child, my parents were involved in the church that followed William Branham. And so we went to that, and it was just, as a kid, the neighbors thought we were Amish, which I thought was really cute in retrospect, because we definitely had electricity. We lived in Arizona. But we dressed in, a lot of homemade or long clothing. As women, we had to wear dresses. We could never cut our hair. The adult women were not allowed to wear makeup. Like, there was a lot of, you couldn't have a television. You didn't participate in Halloween because Satan was out for your soul on that night. Some of this stuff, like, I don't really mind. Like, growing up without television probably really helped me out quite a lot. But yeah, so that was our experience. It was very alienating, and but we didn't stay in it super long. As I was telling Andrew before we hopped on, my dad was actually an elder at the church out in, it was Glendale or Peoria, somewhere on the west side of Phoenix, and he had they got into like a dispute with the other elders, and so we left. Basically, I had always thought we left because they were straying too far from the prophet's message, and that may have been something to it, but so we got out of it, but then we would stay home all day on Sundays and listen to the tapes, because that's a big thing in the message, is you have all the tapes,
all the Branham tapes.
Exactly. So we'd sit and listen to that, and it was a very bizarre way to grow up, alienating and strange.
Yeah, it's a very isolated and sheltered world. And so now we've done previous episodes before on brand, like I said, but the primary aspect of this discussion is that you got heavily into the New Age. So really, your before Christ story was someone who was heavily into the New Age on many different levels. Again, it's a broad scope. So what would you say, and it's always, I think it's different for every single person, what was the catalyst, what was the gateway for you kind of getting into all these practices? I mean, there's a lot of them that you're into, but what was the initial catalyst?
I've been thinking about this, and it's, in 2010 is when I really started diving into a lot of these. However, it was really, early on in my life, I would have this weird draw to things of the occult. And so, I was reflecting on as a child, not a super small child, but small, maybe 8 or so, that age where I could go to the library with my mom, but be allowed to go and look on my own.
Yeah.
And so I would feel like this pull to go to this one specific corner of the Glendale Public Library, which was where all the occult books were. And I would sit and stare at them and be terrified of them and not sure why I felt that desire to go there. My sister and I have been talking a lot about this because we have background of in our family lineage of 33-degree Masons and things like that. And it just is curious if that has something to do with it. But yeah, so there were pieces like that and all sorts of random little moments growing up, going to adopt a cat from a woman who had all these crystals and had to go and see the cat in white light before determining if we were the proper family for it. That just kind of a lot of seed planting, I feel like, a lot of kind of normalizing really odd and occult behavior. And then it wasn't really until 2010, and I feel like the major catalyst was I had gone through a divorce, and I had spent my 20s really agnostic, and then I in my 30s really started spiritually seeking, and just looking for answers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would also make sense too that something traumatic like a divorce usually is a catalyst for someone to start really seeking for answers, because that's, for anyone who's gone through that, it's incredibly difficult and challenging, and it's almost like your whole life is ripped out from you, and it's like you have to start all over again, for sure. It is interesting you mentioned too about, the allure you had to the occult even as a child, unsuspecting. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this too, because you have a past and a background too. I think there is really a true spiritual aspect where, you think about Jesus when he says, suffer not the little children, for such is the kingdom of heaven. Or when Jesus says, if anyone causes these little ones to stumble, it is better that they're tied to a millstone, thrown into the sea. So there's a real gravitas that Jesus puts about, the innocence of children, for sure. And I think, and I've experienced that too as a kid. There's 2 particular examples. I remember there was a friend of mine next door. His name is Ben Fry. And I remember him telling me all about this Ouija board that he was playing with. And this is when I'm 10 years old, roughly. And he is talking about, the different messages and how the thing, whatever you call it, was moving around on its own a couple of times. And he started seeing messages written in blood on the wall of things I won't repeat. And it's, I think about in hindsight, this kid he would like to tell tall tales. He's one of those kids. But even I think as a 10-year-old boy, I could tell that he was being for real in that moment. Then another moment too was, similar to the library, is that I got into these books called The Adventures of the Lone Wolf, which is kind of like a role-playing game, kind of like, you remember those Choose Your Own Adventure books? Yeah. So it's basically one of those, but you have different categories of both physical spells, but also magic that you can use. But one of them is basically the power of divination. And so I remember being allured when I'd see that was a character that's a power you can kind of give your character. And I would give that to them, not really knowing what it was. And it wasn't until later I found out. I was like, oh my goodness, when I became a Christian, I didn't know that's what it was doing something that was wrong like that. But what about you, Andrew? Like as you were younger, did you have any times where you experienced some sort of allure of the occult at being younger or growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a going to Christian school, so the pendulum kind of swinged for me on the opposite direction to where I knew those things were there, but I was absolutely terrified of them, and you would never see me trying to get anywhere around them. You know, if I heard about it, I didn't want to know about it. I didn't want to be around it because I didn't want it to influence me in any way. But what's funny is my older brother, he got heavily into the occult when I was at a young age, and he would do weird things in his bedroom, like seances and stuff like that. And it really did affect our household. I have very vivid memories of very odd things happening in our house in Albuquerque. But what I find interesting too is about like the natural curiosity of children, right? Like Jesus is so protective of the little children because of their curiosity. And we need to be able to protect them and point them to the truth in their innocent curiosity. My question for you, Amber, is growing up like in the Branhamites, thinking that, you know, Satan roams around during Halloween to take your soul, essentially, was there an allure that was created because of the limitness of the nature of evil, or how exactly did that work? And also, when did your family stay in the message the whole time? Did you ever, at a teenager, question it? Did you go to like a public high school? How did that work?
Yeah. I'll hit that last part first. So we left probably when I was 7 or 8. And then it was a vacuum. There was nothing. So you really can't get a kid that freaked out about hell and then leave them in nothing. I mean, you can, but it doesn't work out great. So it was probably when I was 12 or 13, I started going to a non-denominational church with my neighbors across the street. So I would just catch a ride with them and go. And I was spent most of, definitely throughout most of my teens going to that. And it wasn't really until I was maybe 16 or 17 that I started, you know, prioritizing hanging out with my friends and getting stoned or whatever instead of actually going to church. And so I kind of started tapering off and wasn't as involved. And so, you know, I just looked at my childhood as this kind of extreme weirdness and how alienating it was and all of that. But I didn't, I don't know that perhaps maybe when I was older, it became about that temptation to kind of peel it back and look at what's back there in the occult. But I don't recall that. I mean, as a child going to the library and things like that, that was really more like I was freaked out about why I was being called to there. And even as I picked up a book and looked at it, I'd be like, you know, and put it back on the shelf.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't excited about it. Even when we were, you know, when we left the message, and my dad would take my sister trick-or-treating, and I never wanted to go. I always stayed home. I was like, I don't want any part of that. I was older than she was. So I think I absorbed a little bit more of the time in the church since it was rather short. But I don't know that it was a rebellious desire to try to seek it out initially. I think it then became in my 30s, you know, starting out really benign, like just kind of maybe books that would hit an Oprah book club or something like that, you know, this kind of general positivity and law of attraction, The Secret kind of stuff. And then it just went a lot deeper.
Gotcha.
Over time. Yeah.
So then you get to the point where you go through the divorce, and then that is sort of the catalyst for you to start seeking for answers. And that's when you mentioned like the law of attraction. So stuff like Eckhart Tolle, Wayne Dyer, kind of like a lot of, you know, really you'd see like in the personal development niche, you know, people are looking for ways to, you know, deal with your depression or anxiety, or just trying to really rediscover your identity. That would be a major factor after a divorce. So that was a major catalyst. So just what was it like kind of getting into that sort of literature, and what was your takeaways when you got into that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is, you're right, it's just kind of general self-help stuff, but underneath it, I think the common theme is this oneism or all one mentality, which really takes out the potential for God, unless of course you yourself are a God, you're a co-creator, that kind of idea. And so spending time in that, it just felt different, but it was focusing on the positivity and everything like that. And I think it reminds me a lot of when I would teach. So I've taught mindfulness classes, and I would talk about this thing that I called the Miata Effect, because as a teenager, I wanted a Mazda Miata, which is a ludicrous car for somebody that's over 6 foot tall. Just
That's
stupid
funny.
idea. And but I really wanted one. And I would have this experience, and I think everyone's experienced this before when they're considering, or they just bought a new car, all of a sudden they see that car everywhere they go. And it was that kind of a thing. And that's really just the way our brain works. But the law of attraction kind of builds on that, as if you're co-creating with a universe that's co-conspiring with you, and all of that. So it felt good. Like, it felt like, oh, things are moving and there's positive experiences and all of that. But underneath that, you're really suppressing anything that is actually negative going on. You're totally hiding your sin and not addressing that at all. And so it's kind of like a feel good that's not real. Exactly.
No, that would definitely make sense for sure. Hey everyone, if you are watching us right now on Apologia Studios YouTube channel, you need to know that Cultish would not be possible if it wasn't for this studio. So if you want to support Apologia Studios, which also makes Cultish a possibility for you to enjoy every single week here on YouTube, go to apologiastudios.com. You can become an all-access member, and you will also get a lot of great additional content, which will also help support the studio, which will allow Cultish to be a possibility as well on a weekly basis. So we thank you all for watching us, and now back to the episode. Would you agree when it comes to New Age? We've had this conversation before, with other people too, and then we talked when we had Teresa Gentry on last year, and other people we've talked to as well too. People like Doreen Virtue, who actually were been on stage with people like Dr. Wayne Dyer. The term spiritual narcotic, does that resonate just off the get-go?
Yeah, and I've never heard it before, but yeah.
How so? Because I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to the greater thing about the New Age, which is a never-ending seeking. So, and actually, we'll get to my background in Kundalini, but in that, there was a teacher that taught in Nevada City where I lived, same as Teresa Gentry, and I would go to his class from time to time, and it just felt like we were like chasing that moment, like that climax of the class or whatever. And so to me, like that's that kind of constant, it's like you're almost like you just finish a training or a conference or a workshop or whatever you're in, and you're like itching and waiting for the next one. Yeah. So that's what I take away when you say that. But
exactly. No, I was thinking of the same thing, because when you actually go through, you'd call it your spiritual resume, your former spiritual resume. It starts off with a Wayne Dyer book or Eckhart Tolle, where it's, in New Age, a lot of New Age thought is 80-20 or sometimes 97% something that's practical and true. Like, there's concepts of the way that you live your life, even now, and I kind of look at sometimes what certain people will talk about and like, oh, that makes sense. There's this one guy that my brother is into, and there's one or two things I was listening to just to be able to have conversations with him. I would get it, but all of a sudden, I would agree with him in the small little aspect, but then along with that are the aspects of, if you are God, all is one, all is self, and it always is a catalyst for that. But it's never enough. It's one thing you're looking at Eckhart Tolle, and next thing you know, you go down to Kundalini Yoga and getting into Reiki, and it's always the next thing. It's never enough. And I don't know, you can be your thoughts, Andrew, too. It's like, if you remember Wild Wild Country, that'll be like one example when you would see the practitioners back then with the Rajneesh, where they would get all worked up, for 40 minutes into this, where they were just shake their bodies and kind of do the Shakti pod, and they would try and release everything. And they have this moment of just this subtle peace after just going crazy for about 40 minutes. And then all of a sudden there'd be this momentary peace. But after that, guess what? They probably have to do it all over again. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the concept of spiritual narcotic? What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I think the term spiritual narcotic is an extremely useful term because in the New Age, you're always seeking for something more, the next thing. Because what I find is that the person's never really truly alone with themselves. And what I mean by that is what we got to understand is though there is positivity, right? That word, quote unquote, or searching for the best you or the best life to be a co-creator. The truth is the Bible says that people that do not have peace with God are not covered in the sacrifice of Christ, meaning this, that if you do not believe in Jesus Christ and if you do not have faith in Christ, that means when you're alone in your bed, you don't have peace with God. And I think the New Age seeks as a spiritual narcotic to not have you get to that point, right? To constantly keep you busier and busier and busier. But my question would be, Amber, is there ever a point in time to where like you're in the New Age, but there's times when you're laying your head on your pillow at night, even though you're deep into it and you're like, what am I missing still? Is there still something that's not right? Or were you just constantly just going after the next thing? Did you ever think there was something wrong with you or broken in you? Or did you just think maybe you're not thinking about something correctly?
Yeah, I think it's really convenient. So there would be those times, but of course it would be, oh, well, this shadow part of myself is coming up, or, oh, I must be dealing with some karma from a past life right now, or, there's always like a good answer. I mean, they're not good, but there's always an answer for why you're not actually satisfied. And I've been thinking about this and I can't remember who says it. It might be somebody at Apologia, but somebody says, it's like these people are walking around with a Jesus-shaped hole they're trying to fill. Yeah. And that's like the boil it down to the easiest point. Like that's it. But you don't realize. And so you just keep kind of thinking like, oh, the next thing and the next thing. And really the whole point is to reach enlightenment. The whole point is to become an ascended master. And so you don't know if it'll be this lifetime or the next lifetime or 800 lifetimes from now. I dated a man who studied and was involved with the Rosicrucians. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Rosicrucians.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think George Harrison and the Beatles when I hear the word Rosicrucians.
Oh, that could be. Yeah. So, but his whole concept from that was every lifetime is a single one day of school. So imagine your entire life from preschool to the end of college. Maybe you get a master's degree or whatnot. And every lifetime you're like, yep, that was day one of kindergarten. And next lifetime will be day 2. So it's just like a real slow, like you realize, I mean, you want to ascend faster, and that's why you pay tens of thousands of dollars if you can to go to different events and get the next level attunement and the next thing. But the dissatisfaction is just with the speed at which you're achieving enlightenment. Mm-hmm. It's not like maybe there's something wrong here and this isn't the actual answer.
Right. No. When you grew up and you were going a little bit to some non-denominational churches, I'm sure you had to have heard sometimes something about sin, right? And there being a broken relationship with God. When you were in the New Age, how did you justify those things? How did you think about Christianity at that time?
I thought Christianity was a deception of man to control people. And that, it was part of, we can start getting into like, it was the white patriarchy, and...
oh, really?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So, you two are like the worst on the scale because you're white heterosexual Christian men, like just as bad as it gets. I know. Yeah. Sorry. I feel bad.
Yeah.
So, but, so it was looking at it that way. It was looking at these people just haven't experienced enough of life to fall for something like that. And I got, in all fairness, I got a pretty crappy version of the gospel growing up under the teachings of William Branham. So, I can see how I got there, but I noticed this is a common attitude in the New Age. I mean, people really look at Christians as kind of simple, uneducated. I suppose it's similar to how a lot of people look at conservatives in this country right now. It's just really easy to like put a little stamp on you and kind of put you in a basket of deplorables or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, so let me ask you this too. So, I mean, one of the catalysts as well too, and I don't know if it's a particular order. You mentioned that you became like a Reiki master, and that's really a prominent thing too. I mean, if you look up on, in the whole world of social media, especially on TikTok, I mean, you have the trending hashtag of what people who are practicing witches under the hashtag witch talk, and you have a bunch of people. YouTube, for example, just had a official tarot card day.
That's right.
Will from church actually just texted me and told me about that. I was like, goodness gracious, you're just see such a prominent, just really embracing of the occult as Western civilization plunges into the abyss. That always happens. You always see that happening there. But what was the catalyst? Is that kind of the first major practice you kind of got into? I mean, you typed it out first. And if so, tell us about that. Like, what was the allure of getting into that practice specifically for you?
That was actually, so my sister went to an event on Mount Shasta, which if you're a New Agey person, that's definitely a place you should go. And
where's that located?
It's in Northern California.
Okay.
It is stunning. And so they have a lot of events there. And so they had an event there where they brought in people from, they're called the Qero, Q-U-R-O? Q-E-R-O.
Yeah.
Oh boy, look me up. Spelling live. So the Qero came, and they're Peruvian shamans from the really high Andes. And so she went to this event with them, and they did all these ceremonies, and it was super meaningful to her. And so we were talking about it. I wanted to experience something like that. And so what they call people who are trained in that lineage are mesa pack carriers. And I don't even know what the word pack means. I don't know what it means in that sense. But the mesa is this collection of sacred objects. So it could be feathers and crystals and, all of these different things. And then they're wrapped in Peruvian cloth and tied, and it's all very specific. And then that is taken with you to every ceremony that you attend, and they use it to cleanse your energy, and then they'll cleanse it. So it's not holding on to that. And so there was this thing. And so I started searching. I lived in Seattle at the time, and I started searching Mesa Pack carriers in Seattle. And I found this woman who was a Reiki shamanic practitioner. And the next thing she was offering was Reiki 1. So I took Reiki 1 and went through that attunement and continued on. There's 3. So I did the second attunement with her, and then I actually did the final master's attunement with one of her students because for whatever reason, I felt like that was the right choice to do it with her instead of the primary teacher.
Yeah.
But then I went on to do those ceremonies in the Qero tradition are called despachos. And I went on to do regular despachos with my Reiki teacher. And that's where you come together and you have these, they would be coca leaves, but those are very hard to come by in the US. So they would be bay leaves generally. And you would get 3 little bay leaves, and that's called a kintu. And then you would blow your prayers into it, and then you would pass it along, and then it would be put in something that looked a lot like the mesa, but it was meant to be burned. Does it matter that we lost? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we would go ahead, and then we would go out for a fire, and they would burn that entire thing that was offering our prayers up to the spirits. And it was like you had to turn away because it's considered rude to watch the spirits consume or eat those.
Right. And you're doing this while you're up in Mount Shasta.
Well, I wasn't in Shasta, so my sister had gone to Mount Shasta. So
Okay.
I'm doing these up in Seattle, where I was living at the time.
Okay, so you're in
Yeah.
Seattle then. So I remember there's a friend of mine, Elaine. She used to be part of Apologia. She actually lives up in Oregon now with her husband. But, she was there one time where she was like, I think she was doing a bike ride. She used to race professionally via mountain biking. And she was offered to get a massage, but it actually was somebody who was a Reiki healer. And then there was just something about whatever she was doing. At first she was doing something that was just regular and physical, but then when she went into whatever it was, she just sensed this evil presence. She called it as being evil, like all her alarm bells went off, like Holy Spirit alarm bells. Whatever she's doing to me is not good. And she talked to me about it. I'm like, yeah, that's probably bad. I just knew it was bad. But I guess my question would be, and again, we're not endorsing this in any way or anything. I'm just genuinely curious, like from your perspective, when you were into the New Age, when you're practicing this, when you're trying to actually use Reiki to heal people, like what does that actually entail?
So you receive an attunement, which is the teacher passing that ability to you through an energetic process. So I didn't see her. I was sitting there with my eyes closed. She's standing behind me. And then you are taught specific symbols, and those symbols were supposed to be kept secret. But they're everywhere. You can find them online quite easily now. And people used to pay tens of thousands of dollars for their Reiki attunements. And now people just will give it to people for free. And so there was like a lot of contention when that happened, because it used to be something like my teacher would say that when she would meet other people in that world, like people would bow to her because she had that attunement, and it was a big deal because it was not like it is now where it's everywhere and just about anybody can go through this process. So, I think I lost the thread of exactly what all you were asking though.
Yeah, I have a question real quick.
For sure.
In terms of the attunement, it almost reminds me of like a counterfeit laying on hands, right? Like the apostles would go out and they'd impart some spiritual gifts to the early church through laying on hands. My question would be, if someone's in Reiki, if they can heal using energy, why have to use movements at all? Like, what's the thought process on that? Why can't you just sit there and heal somebody? Why do you need to use your hands? Why do you need to make shapes?
Well, the shapes are something that you visualize. So they have specific names. So you're calling inside your head.
Okay.
You're calling the name and drawing the shape in your head. So, I mean, you're casting a spell essentially, and so that's the process. And then you can do it from distance. You can do it in person with the person receiving. And I think this gets to like a bigger aspect of all of this, because I have a lot of close people in my life who are still really into a lot of energy healing, and it could be placebo, it could be psychosomatic, that sometimes it really does work, or it could be that they're accessing a power that we don't want to access, or like what we were talking about before around the secret knowledge that's meant for the Lord, like that. And that's original sin, right? That's the very first fall of man, is to desire after knowledge that's not ours to have. So I don't think that it's all a farce. I don't think that those things don't actually have an impact in people's lives. I just worry that you're opening yourself up to anywhere from just not so good energy all the way up to demonic or satanic energy.
Right. Well,
and you don't know, because you don't know what that person's under the influence of, and you don't know what the person, on the other side of them is. So it makes it really challenging to track that. And people can have really good intentions. I know you sent me over to watch that series on Hulu on Teal Swan. And I genuinely think she has good intentions. I think she wants to heal people. but the approach and the effect it's bad fruit.
Yeah. No, for sure. In fact, one of the things Walter Martin said was that there are healing modalities or just healing that does come from the world of the New Age and the occult, but it's not healing that comes from God. And so that's what you hear. Some of it, again, might be psychosomatic, because sometimes if you're in a group like that and a bunch of people are cheering for you on the stage, that is just part of the nature of humans and our ability to be of suggestibility, for sure. But I think there is a real unique supernatural aspect to that of why something like Reiki is so appealing. So in other words, it's really just people are looking to be healed on some level, but it's but they're doing it by way of a supernatural modality, is what really was taking place then.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I remember seeing somebody for the first time after I had gotten my first attunement, and I was bartending at the time, and I had one of my coworkers recommend a woman to me who was battling cancer, and she came and I gave her a treatment. And it went really well. And I mean, she wasn't cured of cancer, but she had a relaxing time as if she had had a massage or something. It was beneficial to relax her in that moment. But for whatever reason, I was compelled, because I think the never-ending seeking part of New Age, to give her the information to help heal her. And so I had photocopied a page out of Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life book. And I don't know if you're familiar with Louise Hay or her work, but she basically wrote out a book, and you can look it up by ailment, and it will tell you what you're spiritually battling or dealing with. And so I handed this woman, in all sincerity, genuinely wanting to help her, a piece of paper that basically told her, you have unresolved anger issues, and that's why you have cancer. So if you could go ahead, I mean, it didn't say it that harshly, but it's like, if you could go ahead and just take care of that anger, you wouldn't have to deal with the cancer. I genuinely thought I was helping. I was hoping to help. She never came and saw me again. It's not too terribly surprising.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Andrew, what were you going to ask?
Yeah. And the reason why I asked the question about the hands is I'm thinking to myself that essentially, do people know when they're practicing Reiki that it's not the power actually doesn't come from themselves. It's actually the channeling of something else. Like, that's the thing, is there's a modality taking place. There's a sorcery, there's a process, and you're essentially dabbling in the things of the occult, of which you should not dabble in, when the Bible calls those things very specifically an abomination, because it's not, though it may be beneficial in a physical aspect, like instantly, like instant gratification for the person, in the long run, it's just damaging, right? If it takes you away from God and the gospel and the true spiritual healing that we need to have peace with God, and pulls you into something further and farther away, it's damaging. Do people think when they're practicing Reiki that sometimes they could be channeling a spirit that helps with the energy, or do they just typically think that maybe the universe is helping heal them or something, or what exactly is going on in the process?
Yeah, the belief is that the healing is coming from source, would be the word most often used. Somebody might say universe. If they were really edgy, they might say God, but they wouldn't mean the Christian God. And the idea is that the practitioner they call you either, and this is common in shamanism also, they call you a hollow bone or a straw. So my Reiki teacher would oftentimes use the analogy of a milkshake. The milkshake is the item that's healing it. You're the straw that allows that person to take it into their body. So the problem with that is there's a lot of pressure to be that hollow straw or that hollow bone. So there's a lot of things around how you eat, how you spend your time, all of that, because otherwise, I mean, for example, some of the other kind of more fringe modalities that I got into in the world of energy healing, you couldn't drink. If I had a glass of wine with dinner and somebody called me the next day and asked for an energy healing, I'd have to say no. So they're very aware that they're pulling energy through their body that is not of themselves. And I was very aware of that. And there's an immense pressure, which I think is part of why you get on that never-ending cycle of learning new modalities and doing more work in that world is that you want to be the cleanest, clearest vessel you can be, so that way those people can experience the highest healing that they can experience. Because otherwise, like if I'm focused on my own junk, then I might inhibit the level of healing that this person on the table could receive.
Hey, what's up, everyone? We love that you are enjoying our content on a weekly basis, but this program cannot continue and wouldn't be possible without your support. So if you want to go to thecultishtshow.com, there is a donate tab. You can either support us one time or you can become a monthly partner with us. That will allow us to continue this program, allow us to continue to be salt and light to the kingdom of the cults. So please go to thecultishtshow.com/donate and you can support us one time or monthly. Also, make sure you check out our merchandise store. Go to shopcultish.com. You can see all of our great designs. A lot of you have gotten merchandise from us already. So again, you either go to shopcultish.com and check out all the awesome merch. Back to the show.
So it turned out that my sister and her husband and my very young at the time nephew had moved to Ecuador. And so I had gone down to visit them a number of times. And it was in fall of 2012. My best friend had died very unexpectedly in the summer. And yet another relationship ended, and I just was in this place of, I had been at the same bar bartending for 8.5 years, and I just was like, I need out. I need to go. I need to grieve. I need time alone. I had money in my savings account, and so I had been down there several times for a couple weeks at a time. So I just decided to go down and get some much needed rest and actually grieve. And so I booked a room at a meditation center. I believe it was Vipassana. I honestly don't know. And it was run by a gringo, a white man, and there would be, multiple daily meditations that were facilitated. There would, once a month, they would hold a temazcal, a traditional shamanic sweat lodge in the Andean tradition, and we would have the shaman from that town. We lived in, it was in Vilcabamba, which it's so funny how there's these hot spots for the new age, right? So there's common places that people hang out. That town really, by the time we were leaving, it was just, it had hit a fever pitch of having so many gringos there and just really, causing massive issues with the locals because we had destroyed, their economy, like all of the main shops and restaurants on the town center. It is a small area, maybe a handful, 1,000 people. And, but all of the shops were all catered to us hippies with money. And, and so it didn't matter. We didn't argue about the price. We were like, can you believe we just got, a fresh juice for $3 or $4 or whatever. And the locals are like, that's like double, triple, quadruple the price we should be paying for any of these goods. And we don't really even want that specific good because we don't care about raw superfoods, But so I was down there and I didn't intend to be there for the end of the Mayan calendar. It just kind of worked out that way. But there was a large gathering that all of the local gringos put on that was just days of meditations, yoga, chanting. The kids were just out running barefoot and just such a, hippie commune scene. And then, I mentioned to you before when I talked about this that, the next day, so whatever is that, December 21st, it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So December 22nd, everybody is walking around like the Charlie Brown, just like, wah, wah, so depressed because they are supposed to be 5D. We were supposed to ascend to 5D. Everybody knew it was going to happen. The Mayans clearly told us, and we did all this prayer and this meditation and focusing on it and all of that. But
wow, what's the 5D?
Well,
what is that essentially?
I don't fully understand it, but like we're in 3D right now, and I don't know why we skip 4D, but for whatever reason, we're ascending to 5D when we do ascend.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What was the thought processes like behind the sweat lodges? Like, what spiritually is supposed to happen to you? What is the perspiration supposed to do?
Yeah, it's a purification, and you go in and you're supposed to, it's a prayer is what they would call it, and the shaman lead it, and there will be a time where everybody can share, like while you're in the lodge, and there's multiple sessions is not the right word. I can't think of what the word is, but they open the door and let everybody get some fresh air and kind of revive themselves, generally 4 times. It's usually 4 sets. And so people, if they're just not hanging well, like the first sweat lodge I ever went to was in Ecuador at that meditation center. I had no intention of going. I had gotten there. I had been on the bus all day from Cuenca. I had arrived.
These are not air conditioned buses because I've been on.
Oh no.
No.
Yeah, no.
Because I've been in buses like that.
They had to rein them in because so many buses were just like off the edge of the Andean mountains, and they're like, you can't keep killing the tourists. Like, you guys have to get it together, because it was just so common. They'll pass on a blind corner every time. I'm like, this whole straight shot we had would have been a really keen time to consider
seen
passing,
those videos.
but they always pass on the blind corner, and sometimes it doesn't end well. So, but anyhow, I digress.
No, but I know what you're talking about. If anyone's seen those videos, I mean, you're like scrolling through, your Instagram reels, and all of a sudden see one of those. It's like, oh, hi, hello, anxiety, how you doing?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. You talk about just anything. Like I'm heights or not, I'm terrified of heights.
Yeah.
But just those videos give me anxiety. So I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a lot. So anyhow, I had gotten into my room, left all my things, went up to a restaurant that I had been to before when I had traveled there, and got just an enormous meal. I had like chili relleno, and then I had a raw cacao milkshake. So it was like raw milk and cacao and all this stuff. So I was just filled to the brim. It was ludicrous. I was just like so full. And I get back and they're hosting a sweat lodge, and one of the women that I know is like, you should do it. I'm like, I don't know. I've never done one before. I'm really full. I think it's a bad idea. And so she really encouraged me. So I did. And, it would have been probably wise to have left at one of the early sets when they opened it, but I kept just sticking it out. And that was my first sweat lodge experience. Yeah. I remember, and this is a total no-no. It breaks every rule. I had actually stuck my finger in the dirt out underneath the blankets that cover it. So I don't know if you've seen a sweat lodge. Generally they use willow, and they create this dome structure, and it's very specific. Like every stick is, a branch is very specifically placed to match all of the directions, and it makes this star on top, and then they cover it with as many heavy blankets as it takes to make sure that not a single bit of light gets in. And then the only light that you really have is when they have all the stones, which they would call the ancestors. All the stones are in a fire all day long, and then they're shoveling the stones into the pit in the center that you're right next to. So people sometimes if they are not feeling well and they try to get up, everyone's helping them so they don't fall onto the hot stones. And then during the ceremony, they're just ladling water on this, and it's completely closed off. So there's just it takes all the air out of it. It's just this hot, sweaty lodge.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because you're talking about all these different practices, and I think one of the things we're kind of trying to emphasize in this episode is that for anyone who's into the New Age, as much as they try and really put on a front that they have it all together and that you're understanding all these special modalities of secret, hidden, esoteric knowledge, deep down inside, they don't have it together, and they always have to jump to the next thing. So when you mentioned, I'm just curious, you're kind of jumping back at the beginning of the episode with your divorce and all the trauma that came through that. Was there an aspect too when it comes to especially women in the New Age, exploring the divine feminine? And because you mentioned sort of against white patriarchal men, but was that sort of like getting into that and kind of exploring that aspect of New Age spirituality? Was your divorce a catalyst for that, given those circumstances at all?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it in that context, but I absolutely delved into the whole divine feminine and, was studying under women who would call themselves priestesses, would host things like, I actually just, in trying to determine the timeline, because sometimes it's a little fuzzy in my head, I pulled up an old email where I was trying to start a goddess circle when I was down in Ecuador. I was trying to connect via Zoom or something with some of the core women in my tribe in Seattle. And so, I would say it was definitely part of it. And that whole idea of accessing the energy of Kali Ma, and having this just rageful feminine energy that's just raging against the patriarchy. And the idea was that the goal from the New Age was, that we were going to reconcile the divine masculine and the divine feminine, but it never gets there. Just like you never get to ascension, it's never enough, and you're just always are kind of seeking.
Yeah. What would you say would be the gap between when you do something like when you're down in Ecuador and you're in the sweat lodge and you're doing this meditation? There's usually kind of like that spiritual high, but then you have to do it again or do something else.
Right.
How would you describe the gap? How much was the gap between, you all of a sudden going to the end of one, sweat lodge meditation, something like that, but then all of a sudden having to go on to the next thing? How long would that gap take place? And what was that process for you, say emotionally and spiritually? What was that like for you?
I don't know that it was the same every time. I mean, it really, coming back from Ecuador, I actually landed in Patagonia, Arizona, and I was working at a raw superfood company down there. And there's a healing center down there that's run by a rabbi. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but so it's all raw food, and so it I kind of just fell into that life, and then I think it just kind of is one of those things where you ride out the high of whatever that last big event or experience was, and then you become dissatisfied, and then you look for the next training or the next attunement or the next healer that you need to see, or whatever. It's just, and this is a good way to describe it that I was told by one of my spiritual teachers at the time. She taught a couple different energy healing modalities, super fringe. I wouldn't expect anybody to have heard of them. But she lives in Tucson and would teach in Ventura, California. So I would travel there. And actually one time I flew back from Ecuador to get to Ventura to go to one of her events. And, she would explain it but it was a good thing. She would explain the ascension process like the parking garage at the airport, where you go up a level, up a level, up a level, and what she would say is when you get angry about the fact that you're dealing with the same trauma that you were dealing with before that you thought you had healed, it's just that you've gone up a level, and now and you're moving up when you're doing the healing, and then when you're feeling it and feeling like you're stuck in the trauma, you're on that level of the parking garage, and you're just driving around level thinking that you're healed, and it was a positive thing, but there was never an end, there was never a top to, unless you actually hit full enlightenment. Yeah. There was never an end to it. And I think that, even in the Teal Swan, one of the women called it a carousel. I thought that was a great analogy also. It's just a never ending, constant moving round and round and round. And yet you never get anywhere because you're not, like all things, they weave you mentioned this before, they weave just enough of the truth in that it seems like you're on a good and right path, but it's not actually the truth, because Jesus is the truth and the way and the life. So it's not, you don't actually get what you're looking for, back to that Jesus-shaped hole.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's one of the aspects too. And Andrew, you can give me your thoughts. Is that when you're looking at just New Age spirituality versus the gospel versus biblical Christianity, what you see is a distinction between oneism and twoism. And twoism gives a distinction between the Creator, the Triune God, and us, His image bearers, who are His creation. Whereas oneism says it's all is one. It's all one and the same. So when all is one, all is self, I think that's the people giving over to a futile mind and become futile in their thinking because of the fact that where do you ascend to? How do you ascend outside of yourself when all is self? I mean, the worldview in and of itself is defeating. I think that's why, just from a worldview standpoint, there's no true peace that these people ultimately can find. It is truly within the world of oneism. There's no way to ascend outside of the one or outside of the self ultimately. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts are, it's so simple with Jesus, right? It's on the cross. He says, "It is finished."
Right.
It is finished. All treasures of wisdom and knowledge are bound in Christ, right? That's it. And that's our example. It is finished. But what we have with the New Age spirituality movement, we see that you're forever a work in progress. And when I say forever, they don't even just teach that this life, like you said, this life could have just been preschool. And me being a Christian, part of the white patriarchy, maybe I'm in preschool, at the level of my existence. But then you're still going on and on and on and on. You're stuck in that airport parking lot. Who wants to be stuck in an airport parking lot? That sounds like hell to me. The truth about the reality of the Bible and your relationship with God is that the perfection of peace with God was finished with Christ and his perfect work on the cross. But what we see with any counterfeit gospel, with any counterfeit movement, is that the work that Jesus did on the cross, that wasn't enough. You have to obtain something yourself. And what you find in that is it'll never end. It will never, ever end. It's quite simple. You can have peace with God, and that's put your faith in Jesus Christ, who is God in the flesh, who died on the cross for your sins, and it is finished. Your salvation is bound up in him, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you this too. I was thinking about, all the different types of teachings that you were into, and especially when it comes to, especially like the allure that especially that has like the women who get caught up in the New Age. And I thought about this, just give me your thoughts on this specifically. But 2 Timothy 3:6 is talking about warning against, false teachers and some of the things that they do. Sounds like you may know this, but it says, they are the kind that work their way into people's homes and win the confidence of vulnerable women who are burdened with the guilt of sin and controlled by various desires. Specifically, and it's I remember hearing a podcast with one of my friends, Angela. She's a former astrologer, and she had one of her guests on, and they were talking about when both of them came to Christ, they would look at that passage and understand like the allure of the divine feminine. Like, this verse summed up their whole process of when they're in the New Age. For you, like when you hear that verse, like how does that resonate with you now, given all that you know?
Yeah, I resonate with it as well, and I felt so connected to the women that they showed in the Teal Swan Hulu docuseries, where they're just, you can see it in their eyes. They're not happy, and they're just looking for anything. Like, where can I get some joy? Where can I get some peace? Where can I get, some reprieve from all of this? And they're going to false teachers, and they're never going to be satisfied. They'll think they are for a moment. And they'll probably even, when you're paying $5,000, you're going to trick yourself into thinking you were satisfied, whether you liked it or not, just for a little while, just to not feel like an idiot for paying that kind of money. But I totally relate to that. I mean, for me, like, I've really been working on, I've never fully memorized, a chunk or a verse in the Bible. And I've been working on Romans 1:18 through 25, because to me, that sums up what my experience was in the New Age. Just talking about, worshiping and serving the the creation rather than the creator.
It's oneism,
and
yeah.
we became foolish. Exactly. It's absolutely. And that was actually just introduced to me recently, that very clear definition between oneism and twoism. And it's so spot on, you know, and I think that's something as I was coming out of it, what I realized and started to be able to see was I could almost just do a quick judge of things based on, is this idolizing or worshiping creation, or is it pointing to the creator? And if it's the first, it's probably new agey, you know, and if it's the second, it's probably safe to proceed and then, you know, make sure, double check in scripture, but make sure and
right.
you know, check with elders or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And one of the things, last as we wrap up here, is that what you also see in Romans 1 is that you see not only the worshiping of the creation versus the creator, but you see and the byproduct of that is an immediate distortion of God's created order of male and female. Specifically when it comes to, you know, there's aspect where it talks about, you know, homosexuality as far as being a byproduct of that. But even within paganism, you see a distortion of that. And that's why I think in many ways, when you actually look at the New Age world, and I just don't, some people may misunderstand, but you probably resonate. I think a lot of the men who are in the New Age, they're very effeminate.
That's right.
But also, but the women sort of become a lot more like, hey, I'm the goddess, I'm the one who wears the pants in a sense.
Yeah.
And so there's that allure of like that divine feminine. So you see a distortion of God's created order.
Right.
And you saw that. And I think one of the sad things too, when you just mentioning like Teal Swan, is that in Stephen Bancar's book, Second Coming of the New Age, which I'd highly recommend as a great resource, is that he says, you know, in the New Age, your only point of reference to God is you. So if you're down and you're broken, like your only person that can save yourself is you. Yeah. And so there are moments when I saw the Teal Swan when she's behind closed doors with her staff and she's frustrated and trying to figure out, you know, what she's going to do with whatever the situation was. If you watch the documentary, and she's, you know, yelling, saying explicitives that don't include the word please and thank you, you know, that's what I saw. I saw someone who is broken and in need of a savior, and that just broke my heart, you know. And I think that's really what we're trying to really do in this is we're not trying to just go out there and attack anyone specifically, and we're trying to bash anyone. We're trying to say, this is what we've seen. People who get into the spirituality, there's no end in sight. Yeah. But people who find Christ, it's this pearl of great price that's really what that parable sums up, of people such as yourself.
Yeah. Well, it really comes down to that idea of true love, warns of danger. Right. You know, and then what you were saying about the God is yourself and that's all you have to look to. I saw this meme that was just like captured it so perfectly. And it was comparing the Christian Trinity to the New Age Trinity. And so in the Christian Trinity, it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then they said the New Age Trinity is me, myself, and I.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's just spot on. You know, you don't think you're being self-centered or narcissistic, but everything you're doing points to you. Everything you're doing points to, what am I healing right now? What shadow self is coming up in me? You said something and it triggered me. So what am I dealing with here? You know, and it's just and you don't have any answers outside of yourself. No,
true. So on that note, you know, sometimes when we brought this up, we've brought this issue up before in one of our previous episodes, yoga. The question is, when it comes to that was a big part of your story, is yoga, we always try and throw this question out there people want to consider before we have any discussion about whether you should or shouldn't do it, right? And in fact, I made a post earlier today and it's already gotten a bunch of comments, but the question is yoga, is it fundamentally a physical practice that just so happens to have some spiritual elements, or is it fundamentally a spiritual practice that just so happens to have some physical elements? Did I say that correctly? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, sometimes I was like, strike the reverse.
Right in my head at least.
Me too.
Yeah, is it fundamentally spiritual, or is it that just so happens to have physical components, or is it fundamentally physical that just so happens to have spiritual components? So we're going to answer that, or get your thoughts in part 2
All
Gonna
right.
leave people on the cliffhanger. So that's what we gotta do since you do part 1, part 2. So if you guys enjoyed this podcast, definitely let us know what you thought. Go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes. And as always, a program like this cannot continue without your support. So if you want to support Cultish, go to thecultishtshow.com. You can go to the donate tab. You can donate one time or monthly. All that being said, we'll talk to you guys in part 2 of the Amber Aldrich. Talk to you soon.